This is what modern warfare looks like. Nets slung over armored vehicles, nets over roads, all to protect from Russian drone attacks. This is Donbass in Ukraine, right on the front line. Fighting here, often for mere meters, has claimed the lives of many of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers who have died since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. Both Russia and Ukraine claim it as theirs, and neither are prepared to give a centimetre. Not in battle, and they've been fighting here since separatists declared independence more than 10 years ago, nor in negotiations. So why is Donbass so important? What's here that's worth all the killing and civilian misery? I'm Neave Barker, and this is Pinch Point, where geography and politics collide. Okay, so let's take a look at where we're talking about. Donbass is in eastern Ukraine, bordering Russia itself, and it takes in the two regions of Luhansk and Donetsk. They're two of the four Ukrainian regions that, as well as Crimea, Russia claims as its own. Luhansk is pretty much all occupied by Russia now, but the Ukrainians are still in control of about 1/3 of Donetsk. They've built up significant defenses there, and they're fighting hard to keep it. But when Russia's President Vladimir Putin flew into Alaska to meet US President Donald Trump, he made it clear he wanted all of Donbass if there was to be any ceasefire, let alone any peace deal. Trump walked away empty-handed.
So there's no deal until there's a deal.
A few days later, and Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky flew into Washington with a handful of European leaders to push for security guarantees for Ukraine, in effect warning Trump that Putin couldn't be trusted. Zelensky's firm on the issue, couldn't be clearer. He says that if they give it up, there'll be nothing to stop the Russians pushing further west. And he's not the only one who thinks that.
I think there's a lot of truth to the argument that should these regions be taken by force, Donetsk and Luhansk, or Donbass more largely, that this will only set the stage for further and additional invasions by Russia. And I think this is really important for the world to understand, is that when you validate or legitimize force being used to change the borders of a state in the 21st century, this only then legitimizes further changing of borders by force in the 21st century. And I think this is not a rabbit hole that we really want to go down.
For their part, the Russians view Donbass as, well, part of Russia. Russian-backed separatists in Luhansk and Donetsk declared independence from Ukraine shortly after Crimea fell in 2014. Putin says the Russian-speaking majority there needed defending. But at stake, too, were vast mineral resources in Donbass, a massive industrial infrastructure dating back to the Soviet era. Donbass also provides a buffer against Kiev's Europe-leaning government. Others say they need to take all of Donbass from Ukraine just to make things work. Take water. A lack of snow and rain means reservoirs here in Donetsk are all but empty. Running water is restricted. People are forced to queue to fill up. That's not a good look for Russian-supporting leaders who insist life is better away from Ukrainian control. In truth, water's been scarce here for years, in part because of massive industrialization during the Soviet era. The Soviets even built a canal to bring in more. Trouble is that the Ukrainians are still in control of the northern end of it and control the flow. The Russian-backed leaders are calling it a blockade, portraying themselves as victims.
Самым единственно важным, наверное, решением и чем занимаются наши бойцы, это освобождение Славянска и близлежащих территорий, чтобы была возможность приступить к восстановлению канала Северский Донец-Донбасс, который в полной мере обеспечит регион такой необходимой водой.
Russia's troops have been making advances in spite of Ukraine's efforts. This is just one village in the Donetsk region that Russia says it's taken. It had every appearance of a policy of changing the facts on the ground. It's a method that's been used elsewhere. Take Israel's expansion of illegal settlements in the occupied territories, for example. Anyway, Vladimir Putin flew back from Alaska, watched Europe's leaders file into the White House, and did this. An attack at dawn on Kiev. At least 21 people were killed, including 4 children. The message really couldn't have been clearer. But then, who can really be surprised? He's been saying for years that Ukraine is part of Russia. Let's take a listen to him in June 2025.
Вы сказали по поводу областей на Украине, которые мы считаем своими. Да, я уже много раз говорил, что считаю русский и украинский народ одним народом на самом деле. В этом смысле вся Украина наша. Но, знаете, у нас есть такая старинная, это не поговорка, не притча, а старинное правило. Там, где ступает нога русского солдата, то наша.
Now, Russian soldiers have stepped all over Europe since the beginning of the Second World War. Of course, back then, they were wearing Soviet uniforms, but if that rule applies, governments of a number of countries bordering Russia will be very worried, which means what happens in Donbass matters. These soldiers are fighting for their country and their families, and Ukraine's allies are working on their defense. At least one Russian minister said this NATO exercise in the Baltic Sea earlier this year was clearly aimed at getting Moscow's attention. Some of the leaders who sent these ships fear that if Ukrainians fail in Donbass, their countries could be next.